The ransom note in our case was just somebody's fantasy. And I don't know that you can take much from it. I think that bottom line is Mrs. Guthrie was abducted and it's a kidnapping. So whether there's a ransom note or not is irrelevant. I really thought I could get my daughter back because they think he killed his daughter. That was before any evidence came in or...
A 3-page letter, written with the exact pen and torn from the exact notepad found inside the victim's own house, with at least one discarded draft found in a nearby trash can. Today, the same man who once used this very letter to build the case for his own innocence calls it something not even worth examining. Let's look at why. I'm Marcus Wren, the creator of the TEL Index, a 50-signal framework for analyzing statements and behavior in criminal cases. This is a standalone video analyzing a short interview clip that turns out to have surprising depth once cross-checked against the JonBenét Ramsey case file. Hit subscribe if you want to see more analysis like this. Early on the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey called 911 to report that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was missing, and that she had found a 3-page ransom note on the staircase. JonBenét's body was found a few hours later in the basement of the family's home in Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family was officially cleared by police through DNA evidence in 2008. To this day, no one has been charged in the case. Today's footage comes from a Fox News morning show hosted by Ainsley Earhart. The context: an entirely different kidnapping was unfolding in the news. Another family, referred to in the segment as the Guthrie family, waiting for word on a kidnapping involving a ransom demand. The network brought John Ramsey on as someone who had lived through something similar to offer perspective for the family in crisis, not to discuss his own case.
Our next guest has a personal tie to a case like this. When John Ramsey's 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, disappeared on Christmas Day back in 1996, the Ramseys found a ransom note and called the police. Unfortunately, JonBenét was found murdered in the family's basement, and her killer has not been found. John Ramsey joins us now. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
You're welcome.
What do you gather from the latest video that Savannah Guthrie's brother just released? And what do you gather from the ransom note, considering you've had experience with this?
The host opens with a 2-part question. What does he make of the newly released video, and what can he draw from the ransom note, given his own experience?
The ransom note in our case was just somebody's fantasy. And I don't know that you can take much from it. I think that bottom line is Mrs. Guthrie was abducted and it's a kidnapping. So whether there's a ransom note or not is irrelevant.
Stop right here. He answers that he hasn't seen either the video or the letter from the new case, then immediately comments on the letter in his own case. It's just somebody's fantasy, not much to take from it. This is code A4 in the TEL Index system. Story credibility check, specifically the contradiction criterion. When the same person describes the same piece of evidence in 2 opposing ways at 2 different points in time, depending on what purpose it's serving in the moment. Now let's cross-check this against the actual case file. The ransom note in the JonBenét case was not some vague, worthless scrap of paper. It was written on Patsy's own notepad using one of 3 Sharpie pens taken from a metal container on the kitchen counter. A pen that was later placed back exactly where it came from. Police found at least 1 discarded draft in the same notepad, showing the writer sat down, tried, made a mistake, tore it out, and started again. Document examiners estimate that composing a letter this long would have taken more than 20 minutes, sitting inside that house without being discovered. And the amount demanded, $118,000, matched exactly the corporate bonus John Ramsey had received that year, a detail he himself, in numerous public interviews over the years, has cited as important evidence that the writer must have known his private finances intimately. In other words, this isn't a letter he has ever personally treated as worthless. It's the very letter he has, on other occasions, mined detail by detail, the dollar amount, the pen, the notepad, the discarded draft, to build the case for a knowledgeable intruder. Asked unexpectedly, unprepared, in the context of discussing someone else's case, the answer collapses into a vague concept. Somebody's fantasy, not worth analyzing. This is exactly the kind of contradiction the TEL Index cross-referencing criteria call for, not a contradiction with an outside source, but a contradiction between two very different descriptions of the same piece of evidence, depending on what story it's serving at the time.
John, what does the family do in this situation? You know, I'm sure, I don't know how many millions they're asking for, but I'm sure they have access to that, considering that it's such a high-profile family and they have lots of high-profile friends. I'm sure they have access to that kind of money when it means someone's life is on the line. But what do? Do they pay it?
No, not unless they know that she's alive, and that's what we required. We were prepared to require that in JonBenét's case. We had the money ready, but our plan, we were supposed to get a call, and our plan was, let me talk to my daughter, and if she's alive, we'll get the money to you and get her back.
The conversation continues with practical questions. What should the victim's family do should they pay the ransom? He answers with reasonable principles. Don't pay unless there's proof the victim is alive.
It's horrible. It's a horrible anxiety and a feeling of helplessness. What can I do? How do I get my mother back? And it's a horrible time for them. I'm sorry to say. Yeah. And you know, sleep's out of the question. The poor families had to wait now 5 days. And, you know, we thought we had to wait 24 hours because the ransom note said, we'll call you tomorrow. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't sleep. Obviously, I'm not going to go to bed. How am I going to function? And, but yet I felt like I needed to keep alert and be able to deal with whatever came my way. I really thought I could get my daughter back.
Stop here for the second time. He describes not being able to sleep, needing to stay sharp to handle whatever came his way, and closes with, I really thought I could get my daughter back. This is code A8. The story is told too smoothly, missing the random details, missing the natural noise a genuine memory usually carries. More like a passage polished through many retellings than a memory being retrieved fresh in the moment. Cross-checking this against the case file, it was precisely this composure and initiative that, according to the public investigative record, led to a specific decision that morning. He personally searched the house rather than letting police control the scene, and he himself was the one who found the body in the basement and carried it upstairs. Forensic experts have long pointed to this as one of the most serious errors that compromised the crime scene. The body's position, any remaining trace evidence, all disturbed by that action. The story about staying sharp and determined to save his daughter never mentions this specific consequence of that very action. It reframes a decision investigators consider a serious mistake into an expression of a father's resolve.
I think the important thing for the family is to make sure the police are doing everything that can be done. You know, we have 18,000 police jurisdictions in this country, and some of them are small, some of them are big, but none of them are competent in everything. And so the key is that they insist the police accept help from whoever offers it. FBI can bring in a huge amount of resources if they're asked. They have to be asked, and it sounds like they're working.
Donald Trump gave them permission. Yeah, federal agents are going to help everybody.
So that's the key. Bring in every resource you can get your hands on. Don't let ego and pride and this is my territory. That's irrelevant. That shouldn't be part of the decision-making process.
What about lie detector tests? Because I know they haven't ruled out anyone as a suspect. I'm not saying that anyone in the family might have done that or did do this, but it's always a possibility. If you watch any crime show, it's usually the family or someone that has access inside the home, someone that knows this individual and has that information. Is everyone getting a polygraph test right now? What's happening on that end behind the scenes?
No, I don't think so. I think that, to me, the key piece is the DNA. They've treated the crime scene, they've treated the house as a crime scene, which is critical. They need to scour the house thoroughly for DNA. And if they get what they believe is unidentified DNA that they can't trace, then that DNA needs to go to an outside lab, like an Othram or a Parabon, who can implement investigative genetic genealogy. That's the latest and greatest technique for solving, or at least, identifying the culprit. If they can do that, they've got a pretty good shot at identifying who this is. And there's no whoever did this is a psychopath and sadistic and who just a wacko. And so you can't. They don't think logically. They don't. It doesn't fit the TV mold of crime shows.
John,
He continues offering reasonable advice about the victim's family, needing to push police to bring in every available resource before the host pivots to a direct question about what it felt like to be treated as a suspect.
what is it like to be considered a suspect? I mean, these individuals, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you said lack of sleep. You're scared of anything you're going to say because you don't want your story to change if you're innocent. Do you get a lawyer? What goes through your mind when you, especially as a parent or a child, in this case, a child, to be a suspect?
We were told early on, like the next day, we got a call, kind of an anonymous call, that was tell John to get the best defense attorney to get his hands on because they think he killed his daughter. That was before any evidence came in or any...
Stop here for the third time. He recounts that the very next day, an anonymous call advised getting the best defense attorney possible because police had decided he killed his daughter before any evidence or forensic information had come in. This is Code D5, attacking the competence or good faith of the investigators, instead of directly addressing the specific details that agency itself has publicly stated. Cross-checking this against the case file, the first detective on scene that morning, Linda Arndt, has publicly confirmed in multiple interviews that her suspicion didn't come from pure instinct, but from a specific sequence of behavioral observations. He calmly read mail while the family waited for the ransom call, showed no reaction. When the 10 o'clock deadline the kidnapper had set passed in silence, and shared a wordless exchange of glances with her the moment he carried his daughter's body up from the basement. This is a specific named list of behaviors, stated publicly many times over, not a vague anonymous call materializing out of nowhere before any basis existed. By compressing that entire process into the image of a baseless accusation appearing suddenly, ahead of any evidence, the story sidesteps having to engage with the specific list of observations that has already been made public. It needs to be said clearly here, and only once in this entire video, John Ramsey was officially cleared by police through DNA back in 2008, and someone who has lived through major trauma can absolutely develop familiar, simplified ways of putting things when forced to retell the same story over many years. That doesn't automatically mean the story is false. What's notable here isn't whether he's guilty, but how specific, verifiable details from the case file keep getting compressed into general concepts every time the story is retold in an unprepared setting. 3 moments. 3 times a specific detail from the case file gets simplified into a more convenient general concept. Do you think this is just how human memory naturally handles a 30-year-old pain, or a way of telling the story that's been shaped to always work in the teller's favor? Leave a comment below. I read everyone. And hit subscribe to see more analysis like this.